On a quiet summer night in 1912, 8 people went to sleep inside a small house in Villisca, Iowa. By morning, every one of them was dead. More than a century later, no one has ever been convicted. The question remains, who entered that house and why? The story begins with the Moore family. Josiah Moore was a successful local businessman, and he lived with his wife Sarah and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. On June 9, 1912, the family attended a children's program at their church in the small town of Villisca. That evening, 2 young friends of Catherine and Boyd, Ina and Lena Stillinger, were invited to spend the night at the Moore house. The 8 people returned home after the church event. At some point that night, the house became the scene of one of America's most enduring unsolved murder cases. The next morning, June 10th, something seemed wrong. The Moore family had not come outside, and Josiah had failed to open his hardware store. A concerned neighbor, Mary Peckham, went to check on the house. She found the doors locked and the curtains drawn. Growing increasingly worried, she contacted Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. When Ross entered the house, he made a horrifying discovery. All 8 occupants had been killed during the night. An axe, believed to have belonged to Josiah Moore, was found inside the home. The crime shocked Villisca. The town had a population of only a few thousand people, and violent crime on this scale was almost unimaginable. But almost immediately the investigation became confused. Police discovered that the house appeared to have been deliberately covered or concealed in places. Windows had been covered, and mirrors were reportedly covered with clothing or other fabric. A piece of bacon had also reportedly been found in the house. Investigators struggled to determine what these unusual details meant and whether they had any connection to the killer. One of the biggest problems was the crime scene itself. In the early hours after the discovery, many people entered the house. Curious townspeople, officials, and others walked through the rooms before the area could be properly secured. Potential evidence was disturbed, making the investigation far more difficult. Suspicion quickly fell on several people. One of the earliest suspects was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling minister who had been in Villisca around the time of the murders. Kelly was known to have attended the church program on the night the Moore family was last seen alive. His behavior and personal history attracted the attention of investigators. Years later, Kelly was questioned and eventually confessed to the murders. But the confession raised serious doubts. Kelly's account contained details that investigators believed could have been influenced by information already available about the case. He later withdrew his confession and claimed he had been pressured. In 1917, Kelly went on trial. The first trial ended with a hung jury. A second trial resulted in an acquittal. No physical evidence conclusively connected him to the crime, and the case against him remained uncertain. Another major suspect was Frank Jones, a powerful businessman and state senator from Villisca. Jones had previously employed Josiah Moore, and rumors circulated about a possible personal conflict between the 2 men. Some theories suggested that Jones may have had a motive connected to business disputes or alleged personal relationships. However, no evidence was ever presented that proved Jones ordered or committed the murders. The theory became one of many possibilities surrounding the case, but it never led to criminal charges. Other suspects also emerged over the years. Some investigators considered the possibility that the Villisca murders were connected to a series of similar attacks involving sleeping families in the Midwest. In several of those cases, an axe or another blunt weapon had been used, and the crimes shared disturbing similarities. One suspect in those related cases was Henry Lee Moore, a convicted murderer who had been linked to other violent crimes. Despite speculation, authorities were never able to establish that he was responsible for the Villisca murders. The investigation gradually went cold. Years passed, witnesses died, evidence disappeared, and memories faded. The original investigation had produced suspects, theories, and even a confession, but never the one thing needed to close the case: reliable proof identifying the killer. Today, the Villisca house still stands and has become one of the most famous locations connected to an unsolved crime in American history. The case has inspired books, documentaries, investigations, and endless debate. But the mystery remains unchanged. Was George Kelly truly responsible, or was his confession unreliable? Was the crime connected to a personal dispute involving Josiah Moore? Could a traveling killer have been responsible? Or was the real murderer someone whose name was never seriously investigated? More than 100 years later, the Villisca Axe Murders remain officially unsolved. 8 lives were taken in a single night, and no one was ever held legally responsible. Perhaps the most disturbing part of this case is not just the crime itself, but the possibility that the answer may have been lost in the confusion of the investigation. What do you think happened inside the Villisca house on that June night in 1912? Do you believe one of the known suspects was guilty, or do you think the real killer was never identified? Let us know your theory in the comments.